Good morning, everybody. It's Paul Furey, and welcome to How to Disrupt Meetings to Make Them Better. So, what's this about? Well, I suppose what I'm really keen to do, even though this is a webinar, I really hope that you'll join in, and I hope you're going to get something more than just information. I really want to try and challenge you on even on some of the very basic things, some of the things that you take for granted. And I'm hoping that you'll do something, you'll actually try something out, maybe even this afternoon if you have a meeting. And I hope you'll be prepared to change something, even if it's something very small. I read recently, and I'm going to do some more reading in that direction, Confucius had a lot of things to say about change. And what he believed was that we only had to do something very, very small indeed for other people around us to change in sometimes big ways. So he believed in change, and he believed in personal control in doing that. Now, the second thing is that the format of this morning is very different to how we normally work. Normally, we are interacting with what's going on in the room and we get people to join in. We're very much feeding off what's happening. Now, obviously here it's remote and I can't see you, but at least you can let me know what's going on and what you're thinking, especially during the Q&A. What this is really all about is me nudging you to make very conscious some of the things that you take for granted, some of the things that you do automatically, and then make some intelligent choices, conscious choices about how you might want to change and what you might want to change. Now, the aim, some practical steps, making your meetings more fruitful, getting much better use of time. And there are things that you'll be able to do before a meeting and during it to actually make these changes happen. Now, we've got plenty of incentive. One study suggests that we spend between 35 and 50% of our weekly life at work in meetings. So if we're struggling, as I know I do, to finish my tasks, my to-do list, all of the things that I've got to try and cram into a week, if I can get meetings working for me better, then I've got a cat and hell's chance of doing that. And I've got three options, haven't I? I can either reduce the number of meetings I go to, I can make the meetings better, the ones that I go to, which is chiefly what we're about today, or I can do both. So this webinar is about disrupting conventions, breaking some of the rules that we have and the conventions and traditions that we have that make meetings fail, that make things just go wrong even before we walked in the door. But it is going to take a little bit of extra effort to actually make those changes. Only a small thing could make a significant change to what happens. So I'm going to be covering purpose, place, and people, and a little bit of troubleshooting on the people end of things, particularly the people, because that's the most complex element of all. And there's something I want to share with you, which some of you might have seen before, but really for me, it always bounces back to, if there are problems with people, it always bounces back to the same thing. More about that later. So firstly, I'd like to hear about your opinions. What do you think needs to be disrupted? What do you really hate about meetings? What do you think makes them such a huge time drain? Monologues, Fiona says, people talking. Monologues, yeah, that is a real time soak and really, really difficult to interrupt. Procrastinators who sabotage, sabotage. This, I guess, could be people, Jane, who don't show up or don't show up on time. Anne says, going off track, doing the talking about things that we're not supposed to be talking about. Tracy reckons that it's usually an agenda problem or not having an agenda. Beverly, as already said, going off topic. Where are we? When people go off on a tangent, Tracy, Tony, often too much detail, chit-chat and no focus on outcomes or little time given to them. Hooray for that one, Tony, and I will definitely come back to that one. Outcomes, that's a real biggie. People arriving late, says Peter, absolutely. Lack of agenda, Graham agrees. I'm specifically invited but not required. Kind of, if it's not a dirty word, redundant. Why am I here? And it's very difficult to get out of the room once we are there, of course. John agrees with time-consuming tangents. Jane says absolutely lack of preparation. Graham, that's a really important one. Nice to see you joining us, Graham. You're very welcome. Says you said prep. Lack of preparation. I wrote your name instead of the word. There we are. And here we go. What else? People who come in late. Marie also agrees with that one. Meetings overrunning, says Tony. So there's a time problem. Absolutely. All of those things are the things that we're trying to banish. Hidden agendas, says Paul. The wrong people in the meeting, says Frank. Meetings being time bounded rather than result bounded. Richard, I could have predicted that was going to be you. Good one. So this is about. I think about what you're saying is about output, not about time. So good one. People that talk too much, private conversations. Gosh, that's irritating. I find that I get really so indignant with disrespect, feeling disrespected. But that's probably my particular thing. Sylvia, nice to see you again. Big meetings, yeah, too many people doing the work at the meeting, not bringing work to the meeting. Michael, thank you for that one. And so it goes on. Hierarchy, where a team can't share thoughts, so have pre-meetings and post-meetings. God, that's a picture of hell you paint there, Katie. So yeah, I'm gonna write that one down. Pre and post meetings, and then the actual one in the middle doesn't count for anything. And so on it goes. No clear results, says Peter. Those who come unprepared, says Jane. And so on and so forth. A fantastic collection. My gosh, I can't get through them all. I'm going to leave it at that for now. So what do we do about all these problems? Well, actually, there are a lot of things that we can do. And we're going to start off with purpose. Now, meetings, the whole word itself is the meeting word is a cliche. What does it mean? It's like so much other corporate jargon that's emerged, and some of it we laugh at. Thank goodness. I haven't heard anybody say synergy for quite a while, which is nice. I don't think people say blue sky thinking anymore. That's too risible. Teamwork is, golly, it takes a brave person to actually start talking about teamwork again, because it's not important. It's just such a cliche. And constantly, I must confess, we're grappling to find new vocabulary which doesn't have that awful cheese factor. The other one, which thank goodness is gone, is this business about pushing the envelope. I never quite got that one. I think pilots probably have envelopes and stuff like that, because they're doing the real pushing the envelope, but we don't push the envelope. And the one, my favorite of all time, soft skills. What the heck is that? The fact is that soft skills, as we all know, is the very hardest bit of how we conduct ourselves at work, about how work works or not. So we have all these cliches, but the one that we haven't done away with is meetings. I don't actually know what meeting means. As Richard pointed out, that's all about inputs. It's about process. He mentioned time, and actually I want to create a world where meetings are actually called what they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to produce. So why not have ideas sessions, finishing workshops, decision forums, troubleshooting teams? I want to hear about what's going to come out. Now, the wash-up meeting, that's one example of an expression that we use and everybody knows what it means. Wash-up. What a fantastic title. I don't particularly like the connotation, but everybody knows why they are there. The point is that process is not the point of all this. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. It's actually about making decisions, creating ideas, creating a direction, having a plan. These, I think, are output words. They mean what they say. It's the name of an output. Process is not the purpose of the meeting. So meetings just by definition, the word says that's all about the process. We're just going to get together and talk. So, what do we do actually during the meeting? How do we actually do something to make a difference? Okay, let's have a look at how that might work. So here we are. We're in the meeting room now, and we've got the usual collection of people. And I think it needs somebody, in fact, maybe all of us, to do something brave. So instead of idling into a conversation like sticks drifting over a weir, we have to expressly pin down what the session is for. So somebody, and why not you, can get permission to make the purpose clear, to actually say what it's really all about. And why shouldn't it be you? And so, once said, there's no reason why it can't keep on being reminded, why you can't take the license. In fact, get permission, say, look, would anybody mind if I kept an eye on why we're here so that we can stay on track? Shout it out. Ask people, I'd like your permission to interrupt if we're straying, even if it's a good digression. Is that okay with you? So actually getting permission to be the guardian of the meeting could really, really help. So the other thing that we can do, which is sometimes done, is that we can actually give ourselves visual reminders of what the meeting is actually for. An object on the table, even some words on the board to let people know again and again, because I'm going to come back to attention span in a few minutes' time. We have dreadful attention spans. We often drift off. Even as I was staring at this picture, I was forced to look out of the window and see that there's actually a whole building site and destroyed buildings out there. And I'm actually not even in this meeting. But I'm always looking for other places and to look and other things to do to occupy my mind. We need to have our minds occupied, and visual reminders are really important. And sometimes it's just a question of putting up the objective, the end time. Again, that's a nod to Richard, but at least the objective, and say, look, we're going to finish by this, and this is what we're trying to do. And then some outputs. So calling this stuff out, I think that's the simplicity of it. That's what needs to be done. And we need to be prepared to remind people and to encourage people when it is going well, to actually give the meeting a nudge and say, yeah, that's terrific. We've finished that bit. I don't believe that there is a meeting made up of people who are too intelligent or too experienced or too senior to be reminded of this stuff. I don't see anything wrong whatsoever with people being reminded. Okay, so much for purpose. Now let me get on to place. Okay, now what can we do before we've even arrived in the place? Well, anybody who knows me knows a long time ago, I did some time in the army. And I've got to say that one of the most important things that I learned, and I've carried it certainly throughout my life since, is the importance of recceing. There was an expression, time spent in recce is seldom wasted. Often I'm turning up in meeting rooms that I don't know, to meet people that I've never met, and yet I'm supposed to be in charge. It's supposed to work. Now, even if I'm in somebody else's meeting room, and I always am, of course, I'm there before them, and I will always make sure that I am there before them, I will find out where the loos are. I will switch the chairs around. I will take chairs around, move stuff, and I will find out what's there that I need. Before I even turn up on site, I will often phone up, or to be more honest, ask Nicola to phone up and find out what the room looks like. I will frequently ask for somebody at the client end to take photographs of the room and to send them to me. So when I walk into the room, I know exactly what it's going to look like before I've even walked in. I also carry what I call a meeting first aid kit. Now, it'll be different for all of us, but I suggest you have one by your desk in your drawer. I carry pens, marker pens, flip chart and whiteboard markers. I carry sweets. I carry paper, or even portable flip chart plastic that you can shove up on any wall. I take all that kit, assuming that the room is not going to be the way I want it. I just grab it, I shove it in my briefcase, and I'm on my way. Now, it's not just about the stuff that's in the room, in terms of the equipment. It's also about the really basic stuff. As I said, like the chairs. When I get into a room, I will always switch the chairs around. It'll usually look something like this. And if I'm meeting 3 people, and we'll come back to this, I do not want them to sit in the wrong place. So I will often move these chairs to one side so that it is difficult for anybody to sit where I don't want them to sit. And I will put myself there, and the other 2 people will often be forced to sit there. Otherwise, what will happen is that the 2 clients will sit there, and I'm stuck like the opposing counsel on the other side of the table. So I think it's paying attention to details like this, knowing what the place looks like before I turn up, taking everything I need, assuming worst case scenario, and then once I get there, I actually make the room mine. I own it. So that's what I think this is about. It's about making sure that I know what's going on just as much as the client. Now, for example, right at the very beginning, what often happens, it happened just the other day. There were 7 of us. We arrived in a tiny little room. And fortunately, Nigel, thank you very much, Nigel Wood, who works with me on projects, he spotted another room next door. And he, with a brass neck, that's Nigel. If you met him, you wouldn't think so, but he's a gutsy bloke. He went in and asked the guy if he wouldn't mind moving, and he did. And so we ended up in the much larger room. Now, this is a joke, of course. It's not about the quality of the room, it's about the size. And the bloke realised that he was very happy to move into the broom cupboard room, and we ended up in a room which actually made a massive difference to the productivity of the meeting. If it hadn't been for his willingness to move, we would have had a very bad time indeed, and we had 2 hours to do some pretty heavy work. So thank you, Nigel, and a nod to common sense. Don't be afraid to suggest something outrageous like the person moving. So I mentioned about shifting people. Once you're actually in the room, this happens a lot as well. People will plonk themselves down, particularly if they arrive before you. And of course, they'll be in completely the wrong place. And you think, okay, this isn't going to work. They may be your clients. They may be your seniors. They may be people you've never met in the organisation. Personally, I don't think that matters. It only matters a bit to my pride and to my shyness, my natural reticence to raise my voice. But really, it's really worth asking people to move, because it'll make a huge difference to the sort of conversation that you can have, and also how you feel about each other, and the fact that, you need to be able to make eye contact. And you need to see if people are distracted. If they're sitting 2 chairs away from you, it feels odd, or at least it does to me. It smacks of disengagement. Incidentally, if people do sit in the wrong chairs, I often ask myself, what are they sitting there for? What's the gesture that they're making? What am I supposed to understand by this? And I will be extra wary and look out very carefully for any clues that they're giving me to figure out what's going on. Now you can say, well, Paul, you're a psychologist. You do that. Well, actually, you are too. When you walk into a room and you're taking part in a meeting, you can change these things. You notice them and you have an opportunity to act on it. Nobody is going to give you any more permission than you already have. So we're in the meeting room together. We're kind of sitting down in the right places. Well, having tried to move people into the right places and get them actually paying attention to what's going on in the room, what often happens in meetings, and I'm aware that sort of cuts across a couple of things that were said, is that they often turn into endurance tests. We've got 3 hours, or we've got a really important topic, and we're not going to stop until it's finished. Now, I buy that. I recognise that in reality, sometimes you just have to push on, even if you're not feeling great. But what we have to acknowledge is that the environment we're in, now we might be in a small room, like crammed into a little car. But the point is, we've got to think about the sort of shape that people are in, not just during. In other words, are they actually able to think straight after an hour and a half or 2 hours? But we also have to think about what sort of shape they're going to be left in at the end. There are lots of reasons to stop the car, as it were. If the light's lousy and you can't change it, give people a break. And do it here. Give people the opportunity to stretch their legs here. Give people a comfort break here. A breath of fresh air here. Because by the end, you're hoping that people are actually going to go away and do something. They actually need to think, wow, that was invigorating. I really know what I'm going to do now. Let me at it. And if we have totally wiped them out, not only are they going to be wiped out for their next few minutes in the business or the next couple of hours, but they're also not actually going to be able to do anything. They're not actually going to be in the headspace that says, I want to go and put into action what we decided to do in this meeting. In fact, the chances are they're not even going to have the energy left to write proper notes or to pass on messages or to structure the plan that they need to carry out what they said they would do. If people are wiped out, far less is going to happen as a result of that meeting. They either won't have the energy and/or they won't be in the right headspace. And who's most likely to take action? This person here on the left-hand side, this one, or this guy? Okay. So that's the places. There is something else I think we have to draw attention to here. Let's face it, many buildings these days and many companies have been very clever at looking after their real estate. And one of the things we take for granted is that, when I say looking after, I mean reducing, of course. So one of the things that is now a fact of life is having meetings in coffee houses or in cafeterias, which is lovely. Thank goodness. Cafeterias, or I'm loath to call them, are wonderful places now. They're run by external people like Costa and Starbucks, and we all get a decent cup of coffee and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, we are still meeting in a cafe, not in a meeting room. So it's much more of a free-for-all. So the first thing that I would say is, if at all possible, no, do not meet in a coffee house. Even if you think it would be nice, go there afterwards to reward yourselves. Right now, the weather outside my window is lousy, but it will improve. I think we don't walk around enough. Finding a green space, it's even possible in London, and going for a wander about. There can be even 3 or 4 people can have a very productive time walking around and then end up somewhere for a cup of coffee. Okay, that's not possible. What can we do to mitigate the effects of the sort of the hubbub in the average coffee shop? Well, okay. If you must go into one of these places, here's a couple of things that I try and aim for. The first thing is, I always take the place up against the wall simply because there is a lot less noise. I also can see who's coming in the door, but mainly it's the noise. The second thing is, get there first. And the reason to get there first is to make sure that you've got enough chairs and that the table is clean. But there's another thing that I want to also recommend to you. Let's say we're sitting at this table here at the front. Now, that's the only one left in the joint. Okay, let's say we're sitting there. What I suggest you do, and this is a good fun as well, and it's a great way of capturing what's happening in the meeting. I suggest you take a piece of flip chart paper with you, so that people can actually scribble their thoughts and outcomes on the piece of paper. And then you take that away, and that's captured the content of the meeting. Because these places are really noisy, and you're not always going to hear everything. So if it's important, write it down. If somebody said something that you think, wow, that was really cool, we mustn't forget that, ask them to write it down. Don't do it yourself. Get them to write it down in their own words. And then at least you come away with something useful from a very noisy, potentially disruptive environment. And of course, keep these things really short. There's a place, I've got a project at the moment in the city of London. It's at the bottom of it's in a tower block and beautiful, out in the sort of Docklands, and then, or at least around Tower Hill, and then there is this fantastic pret-a-manger, brand spanking new place. That place is chock full of people having meetings. They have PowerPoint presentations, they have laptops, tablets, everything. I have no idea how they get anything from that, but they do. So anyway, so that is last word on the places. So, okay. And finally, the people. Now, I've kept the best to last. This is by far and away the most complex element. So I've just chosen a very few things to focus on. Now, meetings, as we know, are hard work. They are intellectually demanding, and even if they're interesting, they're a stretch. They require us to spend a lot of time together in the room, to focus, and they can be pretty sort of arid places as well. Even if we know it's important, sometimes the material is just rather difficult. So there are things that we need to bear in mind. The first thing is that people are frail. People are frail and meetings are tough. And worse, people lie. We say we're fine when we're not, and worse, we don't even know when we're fine and when we're not. We lose track of when we're getting tired and ineffective. So, rule number one, assume that people really need looking after. And they need looking after in particular ways. Before you get in the room, and this is a time saver, and a couple of you brought it up, more than a couple of you brought it up at the beginning. Make sure that you actually give a heads up. Now, so maybe just send a text or call all the people who are supposed to be there. Enlist somebody else's help in doing that. Because the thing I hear most often in a meeting which starts late is, oh, does anybody know where John is? Oh, has anybody seen Sally today? That should never occur. If the meeting is yours, you should be able to say, I've just texted everybody before I came. And that kills that one. It also significantly increases the chances of the meeting starting on time and people knowing that you're serious. The second problem is a health-related one, and it's also a psychological one. In the States, where I'm very happy and lucky to do some work, I'm going there next week, it is absolutely a given, and this actually is also in restaurants, you'll notice, and it's starting to creep over to this country. They always put water on the table. Before you've ordered, before you're going to spend any money, there will always be water and stuff on the table. In really posh companies with oodles of money and smart meeting rooms where clients often come, they will always have bottles of water and glasses and all that kind of fancy stuff. Now, that's at the fancy end. If you can't stretch to that, it really doesn't matter. But if it's your meeting, there's absolutely nothing to stop you making sure that there are a few paper cups with water or plastic cups with water or a few bottles of water on the table. It really probably is not going to cost you a single penny. But again, it's making an effort which is unusual, and people will notice and thank you for it. It also stops them drinking quite so much coffee, which is a problem that I have because I adore coffee, and I just drink too much of it. I have absolutely no self-control. The fact is that actually, I'm wondering if you knew this, it simply 1% dehydration will adversely affect memory and focus and can cause headaches and, of course, tempers to fray. Even if people don't want the water, offering it to them shows that you care. So that's the bits and pieces that you can do before before anybody even turns up. Now, what about during? Well, Microsoft recently commissioned a study, and it was found, rather depressingly, that goldfish now have a longer attention span than us. And apparently, in the last 16 years, our attention span has fallen from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. Rather depressingly, largely because goldfish have not yet cottoned on to the electronic age, they still have an attention span of 9 seconds. So, what does this mean? Well, it means that we have to be aware of and work hard to keep people's attention. And this means that as people arrive for the meeting, there are certain things that we can do for them that are going to help them with their attention span. The first thing is that we actually allow people to check in. Now, this is, I think, a really useful habit. Getting people to say what's on their mind. It's checking in their baggage before they have to focus on something else. People will always have been somewhere else, in another meeting, in another conversation. They might be in a filthy temper. Their minds might be somewhere completely different. Find out. It only takes a few minutes to go around the table. You'd be surprised. And I've never seen anybody reluctant to do that. And it's amazing. I think it really clears out the old mental compartment for what needs to be done in the room. So, what else can we do? Well, we can certainly pay attention to each other. We can make eye contact. That's incredibly important. And we can actually, when we do want to interrupt and say something, we make them additive. We build on other people's points. And thirdly, we can listen. Now, this is the one that I really want to concentrate on for a couple of minutes now before we get on to your thoughts. And this is this is the big troubleshooting point that I wanted to cover. The thing that goes wrong the most often in a meeting is that people will lose their temper. They will get annoyed. They will get fed up with us. So what I encourage people to do is to empathize, to pay attention to the emotion that's just done a pitch invasion. And this is the single most important device or favour that we can do to help people out. And it's just as simple as looking out for 3 bits of data. The firstly is how they feel. Secondly is what they're having that feeling about. And then actually calling it out. You seem annoyed. You sound skeptical. And then the person knows they've been noticed. This business of adding to other people's speech, of proving that we've paid attention to the other person who's just spoken, is probably the single biggest meeting accelerator there is. And it really works at an emotional level because people feel appreciated. And this is nothing to do with agreement. This is to do with oiling the wheels, to gaining momentum, to making sure that the meeting is going somewhere, that it's sticking to its purpose, and that time is really being used. And listening to each other and then doing some extra listening, this empathy, if the wheels seem to have fallen off for somebody, I think that's the magic ingredient. And it takes a few seconds. It can take quite a lot of guts and presence of mind to do it, but it's not difficult. It just needs practice. Okay, that's what I've got for you today. What I'd really like to do now is to hear what you're thinking, and what have you got in mind? What are your reactions, thoughts, and questions? Yeah, so what's on your mind? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you come across this stuff? And I'm just going to scan down some questions. Any questions, thoughts? What are you thinking? Okay. Marie says, more prep needed ahead of meetings that I'm running. Okay. So, more preparation, yes. Thank you, Marie. Mobile phones are the biggest distraction in my view. Any suggestions? That's a really tricky one because they're so ubiquitous now. I think it's about fighting awkwardness and asking permission, turning around to everybody and say, look, guys, girls, what are we going to do about mobiles? We've got a lot to get through, and I'm going to turn mine off. What about you? So confront it. If it's bugging you, say something. This is all about breaking the convention, breaking the tradition of being polite and nice. I don't think there's anything impolite about saying something about mobile phones. But thank you for that one, Matt. Nina, what would you recommend if you're in a meeting with a disruptive chairperson who shows no empathy? That one then is I'm really glad you said it, because I should have included that. But so great, Nina. You actually do the empathy. You take over the chairing for them. This sounds drastic and like career suicide, but I really think it's helpful to the chairman sometimes, or the chairperson, or the chair, who doesn't know how to do that. So I think it's perfectly all right for somebody who is an attendee at the meeting to say, Peter or Nina, I can't help noticing you're not very happy, or Jane, you frowned, and that's fine. So I suppose it's to assume that the chair would have said something if they'd seen it or known what to do. So I would always go with the mindset that you're helping, and it's not an unwelcome piece of help, Nina. Jane, I like the last point about empathy. It's also easy to marginalise the detractor or the objector. Yeah, and particularly when the meeting's going really well and you're near a conclusion, and then you think, oh no, inconvenient view, be quiet. So yeah, good point, Jane. Beverly says, I'm thinking I have a couple of meetings next week that I can apply some of definitely the people aspects to. That's terrific. Just keeping an eye on time here. More interesting buns. Tony, yes, good one, Tony. I think buns are tremendously important. Anne says, the purpose has been the most useful section for me. Thank you. Marie, I really agree with the calling out during the meeting. I have done this once and it worked. Do it again. Definitely. Well done. Alison, feeling totally inspired. Want my managers to attend this webinar. When will you hold more of these? Just give us a call, Alison. Always pleased to help. Charlotte, I'll use the tips. Fantastic. Paul, I'm really interested in the check-in process. Can you explain some of the pitfalls? Oh, so you sound worried that you think it's going to it might go too far. Okay, pitfalls, I suppose. Well, the main pitfall I can imagine, if someone carries on talking, you think, oh, stop, it's taking over the meeting. And I think that the way to, paradoxically, the way to shut it down is to actually actually empathise with the person and say, Paul, that sounds like that was really on your mind when you walked in. It sounds like that's going to get in the way for you today. And then Paul will say, oh, no, it's okay. I just wanted to mention it. Cool. Are you happy to leave it at that? Just for now. We can always come back later, you and I, over a cup of coffee or whatever. So empathizing, zeroing in on that person's concern, kind of says, I've heard you, and now we do need to move on. This is a check-in, not a discussion. And you can also explain that. Say, look, just check a piece of baggage in. It's to check it in and not discuss it. 10 seconds round the table, go for it. So you can lay down the law a little bit as well, Paul. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, Jodie, you're the next. I've got questions from Jodie and George and Peter and others. I'm just going to hang on to that, and I'm just going to come back to my summary and then do more questions in injury time in a couple of minutes so that we finish at 10:15 on the button. Here we go. And just get back to my screen here. So my final thoughts. Well, the first thing is for me that purpose equals outputs. I really just want to know what I'm going to get out of this, what I'm helping to create. The second bit for me is about time spent in recce. That has saved my bacon and heaps of embarrassment, more times than I care to mention. Time spent in recce is never, ever wasted. And people can see that you've really got a grip of the situation, as we used to say. They'll really know that you're in charge just because you know where the pens and the pencils and the toilets and the water are, and that you have the right number of chairs there and you know where people are. And the last really big one for me is all about the listening. I can't emphasize that enough as a way of getting people out of trouble, getting meetings back on track, doing the work of chairmen who can't spot feelings or choose not to. It's got to be the most powerful first aid kit of them all. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to go back to the Q&A screen. Beverly asks, how do you deal with the chair who thinks they are a stand-up comedian? Oh gosh, that's a tricky one. Wowee. Beverly, how do you deal with a chair who just thinks, golly, I'm stumped. I am absolutely stumped because I'm thinking I don't want to cut the person down. It could be a career decision. You know what? I wouldn't know what to do there instantly. I tell you what, this is telling me not to think on my feet on this one. It's telling me don't do anything sudden based on temper, because it probably isn't going to be a great idea. So I tell you what I would do. I would wait until I knew what to do. And that might be in a couple of minutes, Beverly, when I've answered some other questions. But right now, I would take no action at all because I don't know. But I'm not ducking out. I will definitely come back to that one, Beverly. That's a brilliant one. Tarlin, I like the idea of asking permission to ensure that everyone keeps on topic during the meeting. Definitely one for me to try. Thank you for that. Graham says, asking for input on agenda to find out what's important attendees and what is not. Yeah, I like that one. I like that one a lot. I'm starting to think about this chairman, this who thinks they're the stand-up comedian. I'm wondering about drawing attention to time. Yeah, I might actually ask them if I knew them. One thought was, how are we for time? He's done the joke. Everybody's laughed. Ha ha ha. How are we for time, by the way? I'm worried, and then saying, yeah, I'm worried that we're having a lot of laughs here, but we still haven't. We're having a good time, but we still haven't nailed number 3. So I think I'd probably draw attention to the fact that actually it's fun and it's a laugh. And I'd say that I was worried about time. I think that's the best I can come up with right now. Good one, though. I like it. Peter says, it can be a problem when there is a perceived decision maker in the group who can subvert the conversation. Frustrating when all eyes go to them whenever a decision needs to be made. So this is about chairing or weak chairing. And again, I think individuals like you, Peter, can empathize with other people who are looking around. You look around the table, you think, oh, he wants to say something and she wants to say something, or her view has just been overlooked by this this self-appointed decision maker, and bringing the attention back to the person who's making the point could serve to remind this self-appointed decision maker that it's actually not just their decision. That's first plan. Second plan would be for me to empathise with the decision maker. You seem determined to take that course of action, John. I guess that's because blah. So empathy with the person who's being ignored, or the people. Empathy with the individual who's trying to push their decision, as a way of getting the room to notice who wants what. In fact, sort of the unspoken forces that are being used in the room. That's where I would go with that one, Peter. Thank you for that one. That's a good one. Jane says, I've experienced the post-it check. Ask attendees to write down what's on their mind at that very minute. I like it, Jane. Yeah, I think that's a terrific idea. John says, thank you, mustache. I've got one. Jody, and I've got a question being in. Can't reach. Thank you. Here we go. Right, the messenger. Okay. Oh, Jody's got an idea. The best way to interrupt when you have a dominant team member. What is the best way to interrupt when you have a dominant team member, and how do you avoid the meeting becoming a lecture? Okay, so Jody, the best way to interrupt, empathy. And so if somebody is dominating, they're demonstrating an emotion, they're demonstrating a lot of determination or worry, then zero straight in on the feeling that they're having, because the reason they're dominating is because they don't think they've been heard. The reason we bang on about something is when we think that we haven't been taken seriously. The antidote is not to try and shut them down because they're dominating, but to take them very seriously indeed. And then you can say, even if they carry on after that, you empathise with them a few times, and then you can say, I've taken that seriously. I really have. And if they don't think so, then they will tell you. But empathy every time. You seem, you sound, you look. You're obviously annoyed. You seem frustrated. You sound worried. Okay, hopefully that does it for you. And also, how to avoid the meetings becoming a lecture. Well, there's been some good tips coming out from people, like getting people to write up what they want, giving people permission to interrupt. If somebody else is doing the lecturing, again, I sound like a broken record, but I think the one type of interruption that nobody would want to object to or can object to is to be listened to. Or for me to do some listening to somebody else, even if I'm not the chair, even if the other person's the chair. So this empathizing to interrupt, I think, is the safest way to go. I'm just checking my screen now for other bits and bobs here. In fact, Peter says, Paul, I think you've just answered the question about stand-up comedian. I'd wait until after the meeting and have a discussion about the impact comedy has on the situation, when it's appropriate and when it's not. Yeah, I like that. It's very face-saving. And Marie says she's going to be braver. I'm just looking for other questions. Peter says, yeah, I agree that we spend too much time focusing on the task and not on emotional status of the group. Let's see. Tilly, how can you step in to get a meeting back on track when the members are talking more technical than yourself and bringing them back on track? Oh, that's a good one, Tilly. So they're talking technical stuff. I suppose if you're feeling brave, you could say, I don't understand. Or, ladies and gents, technical, you've lost me. Can you do it for me in rabbits and tractors? Can you explain it in my language? And that's also a good heads up to them to not do it again. And you get people trained, so be prepared to do it. And often technical people are delighted to explain it. I was in a briefing, an army briefing once, and this is going back a bit. I was in a whole room full of 25 people, the commanding officer of the regiment. It was a night exercise. It was all very important. Trucks and equipment and everything, bodies and soldiers, 150 soldiers flying everywhere. And somebody used an acronym. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know what it means. And I was one of the officers. I was a captain. I didn't know what it meant. I was really embarrassed. I thought, my God, if I don't know what this means, I'm going to miss something. I'm going to fall off the back of the convoy. And so I just put up my hand and said, when it came to question time, said, Colonel, what does XYZ stand for? Whatever it was, I can't remember what it was. And he looked at me blankly because he didn't know either. He just got so used to using that acronym. He told me what it meant, and then he pointed to a major in the room and said, John, what does it mean? Nobody knew what it meant. Nobody knew what it stood for. Everybody knew what it meant. I didn't even know what it meant. So, call it out. I think we are just about there. Hopefully that's good enough. Tilly asks again, if you are unsure what technical knowledge is relevant to the purpose. Okay. Well, I suppose you could say just that, Tilly. I'm not sure. What am I supposed to know by now? Or I think calling it out in a technical meeting is totally forgivable. I work with a lot of literally rocket scientists who are not afraid to ask for explanation. So I think it's a sign of confidence. I think that's about it. I've come to the bottom of the questions. I hope I haven't lost any in the comments. There are reams of comments, and I've tried to pick out the ones that I thought were questions. So again, thank you so much for joining and your questions and your participation. And I very much look forward to seeing you in May on Friday the 20th. If you want to get in touch between now and then, you know how to get hold of us, hopefully. And yes, if you want to talk about something, then yeah, just give us a buzz, and somebody's always here. All right. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye for now.